were still reportedly barred from taking public transportation, despite the clarifications from the government that they're exempted.
Simulat sa pool, pag sinasabi kasi namin essential, kabilang dyan yung work, exempted po yan.
Meanwhile, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte is looking to push mandatory military service if she wins as Vice President.
Dapat po lahat ng ating 18 years old, kapag pagtungtong mo ng 18 years old, you will be given a subsidy, you will be asked to serve our country doon sa ating armed forces of the Philippines.
Vice Presidential candidate Mayor Sara Duterte is proposing for mandatory military service for Filipinos starting at the age of 18 if she wins in the 2022 elections. Do young Filipinos need military training for youth development? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. With us online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. She's in Manila, in Quezon City. Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5. And with us here in the studio, Ed Lingao. Chiefs,
welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello.
Evening.
Good Thursday. Meron ba nun? Good Thursday.
Well, usually Monday, Thursday ang alam ko eh.
Hindi naman ang Holy Week ngayon. No? Okay.
Ano bang balita, Ami? Kanina, by the way, nabasa ko sa Philippine Star yung balita na nag-viral itong storya ni Lolo na namimitas ng mangga nakulong na simula pa nung before the New Year yata.
Pero nakapagpiyansa na.
Nakapagpiyansa. Hindi naman yung nakakataba ng puso. Today, ang balita ng mga is, ang daming dumagsa para tumulong.
Yeah, but it takes that eh. I mean, it takes a concerted effort by people, and it has to be made public before something happens like that. Otherwise, he would have stayed in jail.
Walang bagong kita, inaabangan pa namin ngayon, alert level 4 na sa Kalinga, Ifugao, and Mountain Province.
Wow.
Saka nagdagan pa yung mga alert level 3, dumami pa. Although bumababa na nga dito sa NCR, pang 2 na yung data. Kaya lang, yan na nga, sa ibang lugar naman outside the NCR Plus, kumakalat pa rin.
Ano yun? Puro Region 1 and 2, no? Region 2 yung Kalinga.
Northern Samar as well. Alert
Meron na
level
rin
4.
sa Visayas. Nag-surge na rin.
Northern Samar, alert level 4 as well. Ayun, medyo malala na dun sa 3 probinsya.
Well, anyway, isa pang bumulaga sa mga tao ngayon, of course, this proposal by Sara Duterte, who's running for Vice President, na kung manalo raw siya, ibabalik ang ROTC. Natatanda po ni Ed Lingao yan.
Buti na lang, maranda na tayo.
Pero hindi ka na nakaligtas doon.
Pero she's not just talking about ROTC. She qualified that.
Military service.
Hindi to ROTC. This is going to be military conscription like Israel and what Israel and South Korea do. Talagang toka ka sa rank and file ng AFP.
Tatalunin pa yung si Ed Lingao lumuhod sa harap ng tangke. Di ba?
Tagal na.
Sige. Hindi, pero pag-usapan po natin yan. Let's begin tonight with Senator Risa Ontiveros. Good evening, Senator.
Good evening,
Senator.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening to all of you, Robbie, Ed, Ami, and Lucci.
Well, Senator, I will invite you to jump straight into this conversation. And let me set it up by saying, look, in fairness, it's all about nation building. It's all about youth development. Yan ang pakay ni Mayor Sara Duterte dito. But every time we put it in, and she's also not the first to say, let's bring back some form or other of military service and military training. And it's always in that context, no? But every time we do bring up youth development and nation building in the context of military service, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, syempre, hindi ko aawayin ang nation building at saka ang youth development. Sinusuportahan ko rin yun. Pero yung military service ay isang parte ng malawak na menu na yan. There are people whose vocation in nation building is through military service. May mga kabataan tayo na yung pangarap nila ng youth development ay nasa ganong profesyon. My own late husband was
Yes.
an
I was gonna
alumnus
say.
ng Philippine Military Academy. Pero having said that, malawak yung hindi lang yung pangarap natin, pero yung pangangailangan natin for youth development and nation building. Kung yan ang layunin, mas ang top of mind ko at siguro mas mag-a-appeal sa mas marami pang kabataan at mga mamamayan ay, for example, i-roll back natin ang historical revisionism, no? Kumpletuhin natin ang pagtuturo ng history at marami pang asignatura sa isang reformed at modernized na education system na ngayon, in fact, lalo na dahil sa pandemya, is laboring under the call of education advocates to declare, in fact, an education crisis. Kung talagang interesado tayo sa nation building, ayusin naman natin ang foreign relations natin sa China, lalo na sa West Philippine Sea. Itigil na itong pagtataksil sa bansa, sa nation, by failing to stand up for our national sovereignty, fisher folks' rights, rights of Filipinos to the energy resources in the West Philippine Sea, Malampaya and other areas, rights of us Filipinos to all other natural resources na sa ngayon kinakamkam ng ibang bansa. Kung talagang interesado tayo sa nation building and to set a good example for the youth, to set an inspiring path for the youth na sila ang mga leader ngayon at emerging leaders of tomorrow, mas palawakin naman natin ang ating proposals tungkol sa kanilang henerasyon at tungkol sa nation building. Huwag nating ikahon sa isang track lamang.
But the proposal is patterned after yung idea ng South Korean conscription and yung Israeli conscription.
Yes.
And I suppose from Mayor Sara's point of view, it seemed to be working for those countries and that perhaps it could also work here.
Mabuti, Ed, na binanggit mo yung dalawang bansang iyon kasi wala sa konteksto yung panukala ni Mayor. Ang Israel ay hindi pa rin concluded yung peace process nila sa Arab nations na kapitbahay niya, na lahat sila may just claims to identity, survival at yung lupa doon. Kaya hindi namamatay yung pangarap ng napi-pre-senior moment ako, yung solution nila tungkol sa state doon. At yung South Korea din siya ay may pinakamatagal na unresolved armed conflict sa mundo with North Korea. May demilitarized zone pa sila doon hanggang ngayon. Hindi naman ganon, no? Ang sitwasyon natin dito. Government has in fact successfully concluded yung peace agreement sa MILF. May BARM na nga, which is the newborn sa Pilipinas. Meron pa tayong long-standing unresolved, na internal armed conflict sa CPP, NPA, NDF. Pero nowhere near naman sila sa parity sa gobyerno ng ilang taon na. Di katulad ng sitwasyon ng Israel at South Korea. Yung mga conflicts na mas nakakabahala sa atin ay hindi pa nga armed conflicts di ba? Pero yung mga social and economic conflicts at syempre yung urgent na laban natin ngayon na gumaling ang kalusugan natin sa COVID at pasiglahin ulit yung ating ekonomiya na nasa ilalim ng resesyon. So I think the perspective behind this proposal is not broad enough sa ating mga pangangailangan at in terms of context, medyo misplaced, medyo out of place.
Pero Senator, ang potential armed conflict na pwedeng banggitin at this point, potential, not because everybody's saying Beijing isn't going to war with anybody. Pero andyan na nga sa natin pumapasok na sa, they're posing a security threat to the Philippines, yung Chinese of course. Although everybody's saying hindi nga matutuloy ang armed conflict na yan, you don't think that's enough reason para lang naman maghanda daw tayo na meron tayong ganitong military force na trained na pwedeng tawagin anytime. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons the Armed Forces of the Philippines is, of course, supporting the proposal of Mayor Sara.
Well, I'm glad, Ami, na you've circled back sa West Philippine Sea at China. Actually, na-appreciate ko yung sinabi ni Defense Secretary mismo, Lorenzana, na meron din siyang reservations about it. Mas may pagtingin siya at yung AFP at DND, di umano, syempre dun sa pagiging mandatory ng ROTC, yung training. Pero siya mismo, he doesn't see eye to eye with the mayor dito sa proposal ng mandatory military service. At kung sa China lang, sa West Philippine Sea, population-wise lang, wala naman tayong iba. Diba? If it should degenerate into a shooting war. Diba? Biro ng mga kababayan natin, humaching lang sila lilipad na tayo. Saka hello, wala naman sa atin na nananawagan, let's war on China, let's cause her to make war on us. Hindi rin naman tama kami sa amin. Hindi yan gagawin ng China kasi she cannot afford to look like the rogue state that the way she's behaving towards us. Lahat tayo, kahit kaming nasa oposisyon, kahit kami mga critics, we're saying we must push our case vis-a-vis China through every political and diplomatic means. Nasa sa ating kamay na nga yung pinaka makapangyarihang instrumento, di ba? Yung Hague ruling. And if we do our homework, makipag-ayos tayo ng common position sa ASEAN or at least dun sa mga other claimant countries within ASEAN na in-engage din ang China, with self-respect and effectively, we can count on the support of the other naval powers in the world, yung ibang mga regional at ibang formations yan tulad ng Quad. I think that is the way to go. Huwag nilang gawing excuse yung China sa West Philippines. Sobra na nga nilang bini-BFF yung China dyan kahit ina-undermine na yung national interest natin. Huwag nilang gawing excuse yon to try to push mandatory military service on the whole population. On that front, that definitely potential or actual already conflict front, let us deploy all our proper political and diplomatic strategies like any self-respecting administration should do.
Baka naman yung the discipline part of it, because that's what everybody says about military training, it instills discipline. And alam mo di ba I'm sure you know this kasi, I don't know about you, pero ako, naabutan ko pa yung Citizens Army Training, pati mga babae, noong panahon ni Marcos, di ba? And, ano pa nga ako XO pa nga ako
Wow!
Yes, ang turo doon, di ba?
Di talaga
really, Deputy Corps Commander ako. And ang turo pa nga doon is, obey first before you question, Yung talagang ganong klaseng discipline, which is necessary for a soldier. So my question to you is, do you think that having 18-year-olds and above render military service will instill the discipline that is needed supposedly in this country? And secondly, is that something you would agree to if it were just a matter of, say, ROTC? Kasi magkaiba nga yun, di ba? Would you be more willing for the ROTC to be restored?
Rather than trying to backtrack towards a compromise, I think we've done too much of that already, especially in the past 6 years. Mas gusto kong maging proactive, step forward with the proposal. Halimbawa, dun sa ROTC, tingin ko it should remain an option for college students, lalo na yung may passion talaga for the profession of arms, di ba? Yung military professionalism, yung ganong brand ng disiplina, which every country at this state of human history mukhang kinakailangan pa rin sa ating nation state. Pero kung disiplina yung hinahanap natin, wow, Lucy, I see discipline in the ranks, for example, of the young doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals na hindi talaga inaabandona hanggat kakayanin nila yung mga ospital at clinic just to heal and save the lives of us Filipinos sa kabila nitong COVID. Kung disiplina ang hinahanap natin, kilalanin naman natin at suportahan yung mga patuloy na nagtatrabaho, naghahanap buhay, naghahanap ng trabaho, nag-iimbento ng hanap buhay to keep on keeping their families alive kahit panahon ng recession ngayon. Kung disiplina ang hinahanap natin, hindi ba tayo magpupugay sa mga artists and cultural workers natin na in the face of sobrang undermined yung hanap buhay nila these past almost 3 years? Tuloy-tuloy sila sa mga volunteer programs, pangangampanya para sa ayuda, suporta, even relief sa mga natural disaster victims all throughout. Lipas na yung panahon na pwede nilang ikahon yung, di ba, naabutan nga na bayan, disiplina ang kailangan. Oo.
Yes.
I mean, we've evolved way beyond that now. Mas malawak ang mundo, hindi na nila pwedeng ibalik sa isang dating yugto ng kasaysayan or to revise history. We know the excesses of that track. Ayaw na rin natin balikan yon. We should step forward. So yung ganyang panukala nila, it belongs to the past. It should not be part of our future.
Okay, Senator Risa, marami pa po kaming tanong sa inyo. Steady lang po kayo. We just need to take a break, but we will have more questions for you. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs on One News. We continue our conversation with 2022 re-election Senator Risa Ontiveros. Mama, let me go back to one of the concerns raised by Secretary Lorenzana. While in principle he seems to like the idea of bringing back ROTC, he also has some concerns. Among them, it's an added cost. Dagdag gastos yan dahil siyempre you will have to train people in the, I don't know, kung millions or hundreds of thousands, and that means more equipment and so on down the line. So that's an added cost over and above other added costs that are ratcheting up in the military, among which are, just to mention some, yung ballooning pensions for the military that are projected to reach 850 billion per year in the next 20 years. Last year lang, in 2021, I think we had to budget 135 billion pesos just for pension. So, these are things that add up at the time of the pandemic. I don't know, what do you think of this? When you look at, take a step back and look at the big picture, the funding and the money and the pesos and cents, what does it look like to you?
Well, Sec Lorenzana certainly knows what he's talking about kasi taon-taon siya talaga yung humarap sa amin sa Kongreso the last half decade. Siya pa rin, well, yung successor nila or kung sila yung i-retain, sila pa rin, ang D&D Sec pa rin, ang haharap sa Kongreso for the budget of the D&D and the AFP and the General Appropriations Act. At totoo na the past several years, parang naging mas exciting, I think, if I could speak for my colleagues also in the Senate, mas exciting tignan talaga yung budgeting para sa D&D at saka sa AFP. Kasi mas pinasok na nila yung next stages ng kanilang military modernization. At every time humarap si Sec Lorenzano, wala naman siyang maraming hininging dagdag na plantilla positions para sa personnel, mas yung capacitating yung existing personnel nila or yung modest na complement na idadagdag nila every year. At tama, yung pag-improve ng kanilang material, yung pinoprocure nila from domestic sources and definitely also from foreign sources. Pati yung mga ibang equipment o sasakyan na decommission ng ibang bansa pero serviceable pa rin at ina-acquire natin dito. And definitely, that pension situation ay something na certainly yung susunod na administrasyon, kailangan nila to take that bull by the horns, ika nga wrestle it to the ground, at magkaroon ng isang maayos na plano para sa military pension institution moving forward. Sinasabi kasi nila na mas malaki na daw ang kaperahan para sa pensyon sa ating mga veterano at mga retirees kesa sa sweldo at benepisyo para sa mga currently serving personnel. So yan, tulad nung pagtingin natin sa paano aayusin yung GSIS, yung SSS, itong pension system and probably also yung sa PNP, kailangan ilagay sa maayos para maging sustainable siya, patuloy na galangin yung obligasyon natin sa ating mga veterano at retirees na nagsilbi sa bayan, pero siguruhin din na maayos yung sweldo at benepisyo sa mga currently serving personnel. Lalo na we're also looking at very good upcoming reforms tulad ng pag-provide ng security of tenure sa Chief of Staff ng Armed Forces para may panahon sila i-internalize or rather i-institutionalize yung mga reforma na maaari nilang ilulunsad. And last but not the least, kaya importante itong issue ng kaperahan kahit sa pagtimbang ng ganyong klaseng panukala tulad ng mayor, ay dahil di ba nga yung sa Basis Conversion and Development Authority, dapat yung proceeds sa either pagbebenta ng bahagi or pagdevelop ng mga base or dating base ng Pilipinas dito sa ating bansa, may significant portion doon na napupunta sa military modernization. So all this time, I heard they were speaking more about quality than simply quantity.
Senator, at this point, isa pa rin tayo sa pinakamahina, probably, one of the weakest militaries in the region.
Yes.
Sa tingin nyo, by way of legislation or even by executive orders, executive actions, anong pwedeng gawin to improve the defense capability ng bansa? Yung credible defense lang.
Exactly. Opo, Miss Ami. Ayun din yung lagi kong tinatanong noon nung nagsaserve ako sa Commission on Appointments tuwing may haharap na mga bagong appointed or promoted na dumadaan sa confirmation process. Credible defense posture. And one important first step ay yung matagal na ina-advocate ni UP Political Science Professor Dr. Clarita Carlos. Archipelagic nation tayo. Di hamak na mas malaki pa ang ating marine kesa land area. So first step should be upgrade ang ating Philippine Navy, ang Philippine Coast Guard. In addition, tingin ko ilunsad yung Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources bilang hindi lang BIFAR sa ilalim ng Department of Agriculture, pero full-fledged department talaga siya. Even in terms of credibly and effectively engaging China in the West Philippine Sea, yung Navy talaga yung kailangan nating i-upgrade. At kapag ang isang archipelagic nation tulad natin, ginawang credible ang capacity ng ating Navy, the whole armed forces will benefit from that. Kasi nga, di ba sa AFP sinasabi nila meron silang interoperability also among the different branches of service. Pag malakas ang Navy natin, that I believe, speaking as a civilian, that could only serve to complement the overall capacity of the AFP, including the Army and the Air Force.
Senator Risa,
Okay, Senator.
Go ahead, Lucy. Go ahead, Lucy.
No, I was going to ask you about the latest law that you sponsored, and this is the adoption law, no? And I think this is very encouraging for childless couples, no? And even couples with children who want to be able to adopt, because it's been so very difficult. And I have many friends who have gone through the adoption process. And by the time they get the adoption papers, mga tipong 10 years old na yung mga anak nila at hindi sila makabiyahe dahil walang passport yung bata, no? Yung mga ganong sitwasyon. So, I want to congratulate you for pushing this. But tell us just how, to use the direct word, no? How much easier will it be now to actually adopt a child?
A lot easier, Lucy. Una, on that front that you mentioned of the time element. Kasi nako, yung mga adoptive parents dati at prospectively ngayon, talagang yan ang daing nila. It can take several years bago nila ma-adopt yung bata, bago magkaroon ng magulang yung bata sa kanilang pamilya. Now, since we are no longer requiring that the adoption process go through the courts, nandun na siya sa DSWD where it should properly have been and exclusively all this time through a new agency on child care sa loob pa rin, attached pa rin sa DSWD. Administrative na lang siya, Lucy. So domestic administrative adoption. At dahil hindi na rin siya kailangan dumaan sa korte, hindi na judicial adoption, administrative na siya, di hamak na mas mura pa. So mas affordable para sa mga qualified adoptive parents at mga qualified or available for adoption na bata na more than 1 million. If I remember my number correctly, mga 1.8 million pa ang mga parentless children na nasa sa mga institutions na naghihintay ng magulang na pwedeng mag-ampon. So this will pave the way for that. And it's really a happy law.
But ideally, can you envision, it goes down from how many years to how long now?
It's possibly only up to 6 months. Basta dadaanan ng tama, yung proseso, every step.
Yeah.
But I imagine
how
that
do you
that
make
comes
sure
with, yeah,
that
exactly.
there will be no child trafficking, that there will be no baby selling, that the mother will be thoroughly informed that this child will be put up for adoption and that his future will be secure, stuff like this, which actually were the reasons for the delay.
Related po dyan, iangkas ko lang, I imagine that for that process to also move, it also takes a lot of capacity investment at the level of the DSWD also. So ano rin po yung suporta natin doon?
Opo. Actually, we had a prior enabling step, Robbie. The previous budget season, nakapagdagdag ng personnel sa DSWD, including for adoption processes. Kasi sinabi talaga ng DSWD na yung mga personnel nila nagmo-multitask, nagdo-double duty. Kumbaga, yung personnel nila, in the provincial offices na in charge sa adoption are also in charge of other things. Maaring yung sa 4Ps, maaring yung sa senior citizens, maaring yung sa solo parents, etc. So prior to passing the law, nakapagdagdag na kami ng personnel. And in the current law, yes, Lucy, nagdagdag kami ng mga safeguard provisions to prevent any abuse of the law by potential human traffickers in children. At yung isang maganda rin sa legislation na nagagawa namin sa ngayon, it turns out we're pushing forward mga companion measures. Kasabay nito, may sinusulong din kaming foundling bill also to address that issue of statelessness you referred to, Lucy, sa mga parentless children na ni walang passport, yung iba nga walang birth certificate. Parang walang bansang nag-aangkin sa kanila bilang mamamayan. And that's against the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Meron din kaming isinusulong kasabay nitong foundling bill, kasunod ng domestic administrative adoption na expanded anti-trafficking bill. So all of these working together should protect adopted children and enable them and their adoptive parents to form their families.
Sana rin, because, I noticed that IVF has become, more and more common, no? And couples are choosing to invest in very expensive IVF rather than adopt. Samantalang napakaraming bata na naghahanap ng tahanan, And did you take this into account also? Are there numbers as to how many couples would really be more interested in adopting rather than, investing in their own child? Because I know also the reasons for IVF, no? It's like your own flesh and blood kind of thing. But, in view of the so many children asking for homes or needing homes. Yeah.
Well, I'd have to get back to you, Oo,
Yeah.
Lucy, on the numbers of adoptive and potential adoptive parents, lalo na kung sana magandang ma-match dun sa 1.8 million children na
Yes, yeah.
naghihintay pa ng tahanan. But at least for tonight, I can at least tell you na merong adoptive parents organizations. So self-aware sila bilang isang constituency o isang sector who are advancing their own interests as parents for their adoptive children and as families. At sila talaga yung nagsulong ng batas na ito, and they're very happy about the law. The messages keep coming about how happy they are, how excited that indeed more potential adoptive parents ay makakapag-ampon na nga ngayon.
Pati ba foreigners pwede? Kasi alam ko maraming foreigners na gusto mag-adopt di ba?
Well, itong domestic administrative adoption ay priority para sa mga Pilipinong magulang. Pero merong ding minamanage ang DSWD na foreign adoption processes, and with, I believe, equal thought to the best interest of the child. So kung may best practices na tayo dito sa domestic administrative adoption, malamang DSWD titignan din kung paano itong mga elementong ito or probisyong ito ay pwedeng mag-apply sa mga foreign adoptive parents.
Okay. Well, Senator, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we do expect to see you again, so please be open to another invitation in the future. In the meantime
sure.
maraming salamat for joining us tonight. At ingat po.
Salamat. Ingat kayo.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Risa.
Senator Risa Ontiveros. And now, joining us for the second part of our program is Marikina Mayor Marcy Chodoro, who joins us via Zoom. Mayor Marcy, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening po. Well, Mayor, I was going through some of the stories in the last few days from Marikina. You've declared a health break, an academic health break from the 17th to the 29th, and your attack rate is now at 44.91. So mukhang tumataas yung mga bilang ng mga kaso sa Marikina.
It's a fact that there's a surge. We're experiencing a surge. We have a record of 360 to 390 a day new cases a day, and that's what that's a big challenge for us really. What can be noted positively is the fact that most of these cases are symptomatic and mild. Pero they need to do quarantine, and most also of our teachers are also doing quarantine. They're part of those affected.
Mayor, on the national level, we're obviously still in a surge. At the same time, researchers are saying nagsuslow down sa NCR. Does that square with what you're experiencing on the ground in Marikina?
We need to be very cautious with the statement that it's slowing down, because what we're experiencing is that most of the cases now are not reported properly. So we're considering those cases not reported properly, or they will report it on a later period, so that we don't have an exact and accurate updated accounting of the actual cases. We do contact tracing, and we added 2 new facilities or areas for free mass testing in the city. So nakikita namin marami rin kaming kaso na sa ospital, yung incidental cases. So that's the reason why we decided to declare an academic health break for our public and private schools in Marikina. Secondly, we're ramping up our booster shots. We do now 10,000 shots a day, and we intend to finish the booster shots for everybody who have reached their 3-month period until the end of this month. Dahil ang experience namin, pag na booster ka or vaccinated ka, mga mild eh. So, binabantayan namin yung healthcare utilization rate na hindi ma-breach yung 70% mark that will put us into a critical status.
Mayor, do you have any initiative to record the results of antigen tests? Kasi sa amin ng Department of Health, ang original protocol daw, dapat daw yung LGU, merong system of monitoring the results even of antigen tests. At medyo mahirap yata ako sa loob ng bahay, pero baka meron kayong mga ideas on how to trace even yung mga, kasi marami na nagsi-self-administer ngayon ng antigen testing eh. Meron ba kayong initiative in that direction?
Yes, so Ami, for a fact, kanina nga, I was with Secretary Mon Lopez and Yusek Epi Dancing because we open a res bakuna in the pharmacy. We're glad that the private sector is participating in ramping up the vaccination. We were discussing nga kanina bakit natatagalan yung FDA pa na bigyan ng clearance or approval yung mga self-administered antigen testing. It's a practice, it's a protocol by the World Health Organization. They laid it down at the start of the pandemic pa, at the outset, that we could do antigen testing for contact tracing purposes. Kayon, kung nag-positive sa antigen, we do the confirmatory test. That's what we do in Marikina. We do antigen tests. On the average, daily, nakakapag 1,500, almost 1,800 kami na antigen test. And from that, siguro mga magpa-positive doon sa RT-PCR sa confirmatory test, around mga 30% on the average. Ang iniisip namin, paano yung hindi pa na antigen? Paano yung hindi pa, yung may symptoms, mahirap yung tao, pumapasok sa trabaho, they would opt to continue on working because they need to earn for their families. Maraming ganun. So what we're doing here in Marikina is what we call surveillance testing in the workplace. Yung mga factory, mga industries namin dito, may schedule para makapag-testing. We do testing also in public markets, in areas that we experience yung congestion, overcrowding, may close contact, yung ganun. So yun nga lang, the challenge really is that yung the cost of the test it is becoming prohibitive and talagang it's putting strain to the budget of the local government because we also do now the vaccination and the quarantine and treatment, maintenance of treatment and quarantine facilities. So it's very challenging. Tapos we provide food packs, home care kits para do sa mga active cases naman. So yun nga lang, swerte lang sa Marikina dahil marami pa rin tumutulong from the private sector.
Kamusta yung no vax, no ride? Hindi ho kayo nag-implement no, sa Marikina? Bakit ho?
It's not practical, I think. And it's very difficult to enforce and to monitor. For example, naglabas ang LTFRB ng isang joint circular in accordance to the mandate provided under the Department Order of the Department of Tourism, Transportation, that they will require vaccination cards from those drivers of public utility vehicles, conductors and other related workers in the transport industry. Malino naman sinabi doon sa RA 11525. This is the act establishing our COVID vaccination program. It was enacted almost a year ago, last February of 2021. Malino na sinasabi doon sa provision na yun, if I'm not mistaken, on Section 12 of the said Republic Act, that vaccine cards shall not be required as an additional mandatory requirement for employment or workers. And it is also stated in that law. Legally sinasabi nila based on the facts provided by the experts that vaccinated individuals are not considered immune from COVID-19. So nakita namin dito na parang mas practical na-implement pa yung minimum public health standard, yung social distancing, wearing of face mask. We encourage, it's optional to wear face shield as an additional safety measures. It tends really to be impractical given our current situation. And there are cases it may be discriminating to the movement of the majority of our people. Not to mention the inconvenience that it costs to those who are taking public transportation, whether vaccinated or not. Yung iba nasabi sa amin, anti-poor dahil ang nagpa-public transport naman talaga yung mga daily wage earner, yung mga walang sariling sasakyan. So
did the Metro Manila Council agree on this? Were you even consulted on this? And is there support among the mayors for this?
Yes, Luigi, it was suggested, it was proposed to the Metro Manila Council. In fact, there was a resolution passed by the MMC urging the different LGUs through the Sangguniang Panlungsod of Pambayan, our corresponding city councils, to enact ordinances along this line. In our case, what we simply, this is under the principle of parens patria, yung a good father to the nation. You protect the interest, welfare of those needed to be protected. So we enacted, but not to simply to restrict or to regulate the movements of the unvaccinated. If their movements will be not essential, not to access essential goods, for example, medicines, foods. May exemption yung those who will be going to work and those other important matters that they need to attend to. They are exempted. So ang nababawalan lang dito sa Marikina, in effect, through our ordinance, is that yung mga non-essential, yung mga leisure, mga social activities unnecessary at this point in time. Plus the fact it's ad interim, it's temporary only, provided that we are considering that we are on an alert level.
Actually, Mayor, I understand that. No, it's just that mga ako that at least you acknowledge that in the city of Marikina, you find it impractical because that's also what many people think about the law. While the intentions may be good, it's really hard to implement, and ang dami talagang mga drivers, jeepney drivers, taxi drivers and even the passengers, workers na nakalimutan lang yung vax card, wala na, mag-a-absent na for the day, no? So I'm just wondering, bakit buti pa kayo naisip niyo? I mean, to put it bluntly, no? Wala ba nakaisip na parang, teka lang, ang hirap i-enforce nito,
Well, Luigi,
ang daming makakawawa.
Na-report yata sa media that I was the one who the last mayor to sign the said
we remember that
of the MMC. That's true. I did not immediately affix my signature dahil I want to qualify sana nga kung ano yung mga exemptions, and sinasabi ng batas there should be valid, reasonable standard that we need to adopt. Due process of law should be observed. Dahil inviolable yung right of the individual to travel. It's not absolute. Sinasabi sa Constitution, it's not an absolute right. But malinaw naman din yung sinasabi ng Constitution, hindi mo pwedeng hulihin ng tao kung walang malinaw na batas din. Nulla buena lege sine lege. without any law, there will be no punishment eh. Yun ang sinasabi ko nga eh. Anong basis mo para hulihin ngayon yung mga mga tao na walang vaccination card?
Mayor, ibalik ko rin po.
On the basis of a mere department order eh.
Mayor, ibalik ko po, I mean, speaking of walang vaccination card, ibalik ko rin po dun sa practicability and the practicality of even implementing it. And every time I'm reminded of that question na I think we've asked you, we've asked many LGUs, yung po bang mga database nyo interoperable na finally? And we're speaking precisely on the level, for example, of QR codes. And I ask because, you know, a lot of LGUs now allow non-residents to take their booster shots kahit hindi na resident. But I had the experience of, you know, I took my doses in one LGU and then in another LGU. Basically, it was meaningless to them. The QR code and the vaccine card that we showed, parang, and it just reminded me, hanggang ngayon po ba, hindi pa rin interoperable yung mga database as expressed by the QR codes, I would presume.
I would be candid on it, Robbie. It's interoperable, but the data is not updated. So we have the same experience. We allow individuals coming from other LGUs or other cities. But when we check the data, hindi pa ma-access yung iba eh. Yung iba na-access, yung iba hindi ma-access. So nagre-rely na lang kami talaga on the physical card that they will present. Yung actual card na ipapakita nila.
But isn't that isn't that ironic that the physical card, I would presume, is easier to forge, right? It's easier to forge a physical card. And the other thing is, I don't want to get too much into the detail of my experience. But the thing was, this is the same card and the same QR code and the same data that we entered to get a VaxCert, which was the national database. So it seems that my local data went into the national database. We were able to use that for airports, for travel, and so on. And yet, that national database is not honored. And when we said, pwede ba yung VaxCert? Kasi national na to, interagency pa. Coming down to the LGU, that also was not allowed.
Yeah, that's true, Robbie. Hindi na ako lalayo. You look into the wordings of the department order of the Department of Transportation, the various guidelines, circulars promulgated by the different agencies under DOT. For example, itong LTFRB, ang proof of ang proof of vaccination mo, ang ipapakita mo pa rin yung vaccination card mo or kaya yung galing sa LGU. I think it's an admission on the part of the national government na talagang hindi pa rin wala pa rin tayong centralized information or repository on data. Ganun eh, yun ang nire-require pag nag-i-enforce sila ngayon eh. Kaya nga yung may kumakalat nga na there are fake vaccination cards are circulating eh. So that's really yun ang problem eh, yung how to enforce, how to implement. I think we're not ready structurally speaking. Similarly, they would admit that even the Department of Transportation would admit that their number of personnel is very limited to implement the said circular. So ang hinahuhuli lang kung sino yung matapatan kung saang area, hindi naman buong NCR. Considering ang coverage, ang scope ng nung order, also people coming from the provinces going to the NCR area, those who work or those who will travel to NCR. So yun ang mahirap eh. Kung may batas ka, dapat kaya mong implement eh. If you cannot implement properly the law, then it will become an invalid law.
Mayor, kanina meron din daw konting confusion dyan sa pharmacy vaccination. I'm asking about your experience kasi yung iba, marami nag-walk-in, hindi man lang daw nila alam na they are supposed to register pala with the LGU. Kumusta naman yung experience niya? What were the glitches? Kasi balak yung gawin ngayong outside Metro Manila and expand within Metro Manila as well. Ano yung mga takeaways niyo?
Kanina may mga magpapabakuna. May preference sila. Hindi naman nawawala rin yan eh. Yung Pfizer, for example. Gusto ng mga tao Pfizer. Sa Marikina kasi, marami kaming nakuhang Pfizer vaccine. So, yun yung binubooster shot namin. May magpapabooster kanina. Hindi sila mabigyan ng Pfizer dahil labas sa cold chain yung wala sa cold chain yung yung pharmacy. Wala silang storage and facility para mag-administer ng temperature regulated na vaccine such as Pfizer. Kasi kailangan below
Very low.
Very low temperature. So the only vaccines that can be administered in the pharmacy are AstraZeneca and Sinovac. Sinovac. So, gusto ng tao kanina, Sinovac kasi yung una niyang natanggap, and may study naman at may nagsasabi naman if you use Pfizer for your booster, your immunity will be increased correspondingly on the potency of the vaccine. Pero pinaliwanagan naman yung tao kanina na yung best vaccine pa rin is what is available. So nagpa-saksak pa rin naman siya. Ang isang option na sinasabi namin, pwede siyang pumunta dun sa LGU operated LGU area ng vaccination.
Okay. Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro. Sir, maraming salamat po. Always a pleasure, sir.
Yes, sir.
Salamat, Mayor.
Thank you, Ami and Luchi. Thank you.
Stay safe po.
It's a privilege. Thank you. Salamat po.
And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.